Right, let's just dive straight into looking through and editing some of the pictures I took on my trip to Iceland. Now, all these images were shot on my Canon EOS 500N, which I always take travelling with me because I think it's just a great little film camera to take. It's quite durable, even though I have broke one of them, but that was kind of down to my own fault. Reasonably priced on eBay, you can get them around £20–30 if not cheaper. Right, let's just dive straight into looking through and editing some of the pictures that I took in Iceland. As you already know, that I shoot most of my travel pictures on the Canon EOS 500N, and the film stock that I used on this particular trip was the Fujifilm C200. I think it's just a great all-round film for travel. It's reasonably priced, and I've always got decent images out of it. Just sometimes when you're in quite bright sunlight and you take pictures of people, it does make the skin tones quite reddish, so I wouldn't really recommend it for shooting portraits or anything like that, but for just general travel shots and a bit of street photography and whatnot, it is, in my opinion, it's quite good film. So we're here in Adobe Lightroom. First thing I did was import them all in, and I have ranked the images either 5-star or 4-star for the purposes of this video, because I didn't really want to show you any of the other ones because in my opinion they weren't that good images. So we're going to look at the 5-star and 4-star images and just go through them and edit them if needs be, or straighten them up and just see if they need any additional work, and maybe just talk about some of the places that I went to. I'm not going to attempt to say the place names because, as I said in the previous video, Icelandic is a very hard language to speak and learn, and I'm not even going to attempt to say them because I'll probably just embarrass myself and get them wrong. So I will put locations and names of places up on the screen as we go through them. So let's get into develop. Right, this was in one of the national parks in Iceland, and it was a really interesting place to go because you saw it was the divide between the North American and European tectonic plates, and you could see a definite divide down the middle, and this was just one of the mountains off in the distance, which I thought was quite an interesting mountain. Well, I say it was a completely different landscape to how it is over here in the UK, and just everything, no matter where you looked, there was interesting images to capture. Right, for this image, I really don't think that it needs much editing. I probably will just scroll down to the bottom and enable the lens correction. I was shooting this on the 17 to 40mm f4 lens. I always find it's better to do the lens correction first whenever you're editing pictures, because it tends to brighten the edges up, and sometimes some of the brightness comes into the middle of the image. So if you've done loads of colour correcting and exposure correcting, and then you do the lens correction afterwards, it kind of can make your image more bright than you wanted it to originally. So looking at this image, I really don't think there's much I really want to do. I might just push the contrast up just a little bit and bring the shadows down, and maybe the blacks down a little bit, and push the whites up. Exposure wise, I might just bring it down just a little bit. This film, I think it has nice colour saturation in it. It doesn't really need much additional saturation put in afterwards. So yeah, let's move on from this one. I love taking images like this while I'm out on different trips exploring the world, and whenever there's an attraction or something that everybody runs up to the front of a gate to take pictures to, I always tend to look the other way and take a couple of steps back and photograph people looking out towards whatever it is they've come here to see. I find pictures like this really, really interesting. So again, I really don't think there's much to do on this. Just maybe just punch up the contrast just a little bit. Bring the highlights down, blacks down. I think this does need a little bit of saturation putting into it, just because of how it was shot. A lot of the bright sunlight kind of did wash some of the colours away, so I've just put a little bit extra contrast in there. I don't really think I need to apply the lens correction to this particular image. In my opinion, it looks, quite okay. Right, let's keep moving on. Again, this was looking out over the divide between the North American and Eurasian or European tectonic plates. It's a really cool image and a really cool place to visit. Just the landscape was just so vast and it just seemed to go on forever. Again, I really don't think there's much I need to do to these images. I mean, just adding that little bit of contrast and bringing the shadows and the blacks down just a little bit. Again, I don't think it needs any saturation adjustments. I think as it is quite good. All I might do is scroll down to the HSL slider and maybe just see if I can push up the blue. Don't want to do it too much, just a little bit. Right, and as you can see down in the bottom, I have caught one of the no walking or no going past a certain point signs. I probably will remove that in Photoshop later on, just as I find it a bit of a distraction. Right, let's move on again. This was the same place, just looking out further right and over into the national park a little bit more. I think I will just copy the edits and paste them onto this one, and I think that has worked rather well. Maybe just reset the exposure there because it did go a little bit dark. Right, moving on. Now this is in Reykjavik city or city centre. That's the only place name I can pronounce correctly without sounding like an idiot. I'd seen this building prior to going to Iceland, and it was just something I really wanted to photograph because I just found the graffiti or artwork on the building really interesting, just how detailed and intricate it actually is. And when I shot these, it was a very cloudy, overcast day, and to be honest, I don't think there's really going to be much I can do to make this really stand out and pop. So maybe if I convert it to black and white, push the contrast up a little bit, bring the exposure down, bring the blacks down, and the shadows. To be honest, I do like that because it kind of just emphasises the graffiti and the art on the building a little bit more. Yeah, again, I don't think there's much more I really want to do with this particular image. I mean, when you shoot on film, there really isn't much you can do editing wise, as they are scanned in JPEGs, they're not raw DNG files that have a lot of information that you can play around with. So usually it's just little tweaks, just straightening the lines, adding that little bit of contrast. This is in Reykjavik city centre, and this is their main landmark. It's a really big cathedral. I didn't manage to go inside because I think the time that I visited it was closed, but just walking around it was a really cool and interesting place to visit. Now I think on this it does need a little bit of straightening out because I think I've caught it at a slightly dodgy angle. Just straighten that out just a little bit, and then we'll go down to lens correction, select the lens, and it's kind of helped straighten it out just a little bit. Again, this was on a very overcast day, and it just made everything look really flat. So again, maybe just a little bit of contrast, bring the shadows down, bring the blacks down, maybe put a little bit more exposure. I think what would have made this picture a little bit more interesting was, you know, a bit more detail in the sky. If, you know, there's been some blue sky with some clouds, you know, just a little bit more detail in the sky, which I've not managed to get because it was really cloudy and overcast, and just how the camera exposed this particular image, I just don't think it caught much detail in the sky. Just one more little thing I might do, I might just try and bring the greens down just a little bit. I think some of the shadows are just a little bit green. There we go, and maybe just put a bit of warmth into it, like that. Right, let's keep moving on. And this is the same cathedral, just a bit closer up. I think we will go into the lens correction, pick the lens, and oof, I picked the wrong one there. That's not the one. We want the 17-40. Right. Now let's try straightening up just a little bit. There we go. I think that looks a little better. Again, when I shoot travel pictures, or I'm travelling, I like to get people, you know, looking at various landmarks. Well, not. I just find it, you know, it brings them to life a bit more rather than just being just on their own, devoid of any life. I always like to get people looking at it, taking photos of it, and whatnot. I just think it makes for a more interesting image, in my opinion. So what I'll try to do here, try bring the highlights down just a little bit to try and get some of that cloud detail. Maybe bring the exposure down just a little bit, so we do have a bit more detail in the sky. Bring the shadows down and the blacks. Again, I think there's a little bit of a green kind of hue to it. I'm not sure if you guys are picking that up a little bit, but on my screen it is, so I'm going to bring that down just a little bit. And like the other image, I might try warm it up a little bit as well, just so it doesn't look so, you know, dark and gloomy. Don't want to overdo it. Maybe it's one of them things, isn't it? You might go a bit too much and ruin the image. There we go. I wonder what it's like as a black and white. To be fair, that could work as well. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. To be honest, I think I will leave this as a colour image and maybe just boost that saturation. Right, let's move on. Now, this was the door to the cathedral. This was one of the coolest things about this place, in my opinion. There was just so much going on, and just the detail in, you know, in the door was really, really cool. Enable the lens correction. Probably won't say this anymore because I think you guys probably get me bored of me saying it. So let's try just straighten it up. Let's find the straightest line. There we go. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, I think I was just a little bit off centre, so it's not as straight as I liked it, but you know, it'll do for now. Exposure's fine. Let's just add a bit of contrast and pull the shadows down just a tad. And again, I think that'll do nicely. Now this bit I found really strange and really weird, because if you go into most capital cities, it's usually full of high-rise buildings and skyscrapers, but Reykjavik was just full of little tiny quirky houses that all looked completely different from one another. And I was walking past this particular one, and just as I came past, I saw that it had this really nice, cool, quirky little garden behind it, just, you know, in the middle of the city. And I just thought it was a really interesting little house. Just brightening it up just a tad, put in some contrast, bring the shadows down a little bit. I'll try boost the green with the weather, so again, you just take what you get. I might just straighten it up just a little bit. Let's get the angles a bit more pleasing. There we go. Right, this is in the harbour. I think what I've captured here is one of the boat tours where they'll take you off to go watching whales or around some of the other various islands or around the coast. Again, because it is an island, I think they do rely heavily on fishing and imports into the country. A lot do come by sea and by ferry. So again, I'm just going to brighten this up a little bit. There's some details in the sky there which I do like. Try and bring the highlights down just a little bit. Again, as I said before, these aren't raw files, so there's not really much you can really do with them to bring like the details out in the highlights and whatnot, so you kind of don't have a lot to play with. I think it's more of a case of just making things stand out and pop, you know, just a little bit more than the film, a little bit more than you've got from the film. So yeah, let's keep moving on. Now this was on the way to go and see one of the volcanic craters. I think we just stopped at the side of the road just to like stretch his legs because there was a lot of driving involved, and you know, sometimes you can drive for miles and miles and just it's all completely flat, and then every now and again these huge mountains and land masses just come out of nowhere. So again, I mean, there's not much colour in this, so maybe it might be worth doing this in black and white, pushing up that contrast, bringing down the blacks, maybe the highlights just a little bit. I mean, that's quite kind of interesting. I feel like this is more of just a snapshot, a bit more of like a documentary type shot of some of the travelling that we did. But you know, quite an interesting image. Let's straighten that horizon out as well, see if that makes any difference. Oh, there we go. That's much better. Or is it? Let's reset it and have a look. Tough one, that. Let's just a little bit. I think I went a bit too much before. Yeah, there we go. That's a bit better. Here we have one of the volcanic craters. I think this is one of the most popular ones that most of the tours take you to. I know there's probably a few more scattered around the country, but I think you had to drive to them yourself. When I went, we didn't have a car, we just relied on some of the day trips that took us out and about. Again, I think this is reasonably well exposed. Probably just added a little bit of contrast. And maybe push the saturation up a little bit because there's lots of colours going on here. Apart from that, I mean, there's no detail in the sky. I think this is just the how the film reacts to stuff like this. White. Yeah, I think that's quite nice. Is that? Let's keep moving on. Now these are just type of pictures I love to get while travelling around. I just love to get people, you know, walking out these various tourist attractions. Let's apply the lens correction here. There we go. Let's try straightening it up, see if that works. If not, I kind of do like the angle here a little bit, but let's try and. Oh yeah, that's much better. Again, would it work as a black and white? No, I think this would be much better as colour. Again, let's push that contrast, push that saturation. There we go. That's in the beginning of the video. I did say like it does make people's faces do look a bit red in certain light, but again, you can't really tell because they are a little bit blurry now to focus, as I did focus on the background. But yeah, I do like getting pictures like this of people walking in and out the attractions and whatnot. I just think they're really interesting images to me. You guys might not like this style of photography, but it's kind of bordering on street photography. It has that kind of aspect to it, but not really on the street, is it? But again, you know, it's a very subjective thing. Right, this is at the other Icelandic word I can pronounce, and it is geyser or geyser. It's like where the word for these type of things came from. Again, this was a really cool place. The geyser went off every I think 5 minutes. So what I did is I stepped back so I could get the people watching it and filming it and videoing it in the picture as well. Again, I just think it makes for a much more interesting picture. So what I did here, I got my camera, set it up on the tripod, got all my settings dialed into the camera, got my focus locked, and then I put it onto manual focus, and I just sat there with my hand on the trigger of the camera, and again I just waited and tried to time it as well as I could, and I think I took 3 pictures, so it probably took me about 20 minutes to take all 3 pictures because of how long the geyser took to erupt. And I think this is the best one out of the 3 that I took. As you can see, the light has caught this side of the water. You can see all the shadows of the people watching it, and particularly here you can see these two. I think it's kind of like shocked them a little bit, and they're kind of like backing away, like a lot of people did when they first saw it go. So I think all I'll do here is just lift that exposure. Again, put in some contrast. Maybe try bring the highlights back, bring those shadows down, and maybe just put a little bit of saturation into that. Now, would this work as a black and white? It probably would, to be honest. That does make quite a good solid black and white in my opinion. But you know what, I think I'll keep this one in colour for now and maybe do a black and white edit later on down the line. This is in the same national park area as the previous image of the geyser. This was like being on another planet altogether. There was steam coming out of the ground everywhere. It's a really cool, interesting place to go see. It was nothing like I'd ever seen before in my entire life. Let's just, just bring that exposure up. There we go. Again, this time we've got a bit of detail in the sky. We've got some of the blues coming through. So maybe if we just bring that highlight down, we've seen some more detail around here now in the clouds. Push that contrast just a little bit. Maybe just warm it up. Again, I might just put a little bit of saturation into it, and I might just take a little bit of yellow out as well. There we go. Yeah, again, not much needed to do. Right, I'll try my best to try to pronounce what this waterfall was, because I think I can do it, and it was called Gullfoss, and as far as I'm aware, that is how you pronounce it. That's how I heard other people pronounce it. Apologies if I got it wrong, but yeah, that's the only other one that I can pronounce. Just an image of this beautiful natural waterfall. It is vast, huge waterfall. It's really amazing. You got absolutely soaked down this bottom bit here because of all the mist coming off it. But again, I like to get the stuff that they've built for the tourists. So you've got all this metal stairs that took you up to like a vantage point here, so you can look down. I love getting images like this. Don't really think there's much to do here. Maybe just, again, contrast, bring those shadows down, bring the highlights down a little bit, and the blacks. Maybe just a tad more exposure. There we go. I think that's spot on. I don't really think it needs any saturation. I think that's okay for now. Right, and this is looking down from one of the main vantage points of the Gullfoss waterfall. I think I will add some lens correction to this one. There we go. Pick the right lens this time. And I think this does need straightening just a tad. There we go. Again, I am losing some detail around the side, but you know, I'd rather have a straight picture than like a wonky one with a bit more detail on the sides. So there we go, straighten that up nicely. Again, just a little bit of exposure needed, a little bit of contrast. Highlights I think are fine. Bring the shadows down and the blacks just a little bit. I might just brush the shadows up a little bit more. Maybe a little bit more exposure. There we go. Move down, I might just make those blue in the sky pop just a little bit more. There we go. And maybe the aqua, just to make that water stand out a little bit more as well. Right, let's keep going. Only 2 more left. This was just a different vantage point looking further downstream of the waterfall. So what I'll do here, I'll try copy the edits from the previous one onto here and just see what we get. It might just give us a good starting point for this edit. It's added the straightening or the crop to it, so I'll reset that as I think it's straight enough. There we go. I think that's a solid image there. I think that the copy and paste has worked. Yeah, it's made it pop, stand out a bit more. The blues in the sky looking good. Now moving on to the last image. This was a bit further upstream from the waterfall, and you can see the river coming down towards the waterfall and starting to break into these really cool little rapids just before it goes over the main face of the waterfall. Again, for this I might just try copy and paste the previous edits onto this, and just, you know, it's a good place to start. Again, I forgot to take off the crop and straighten. I think this is not too bad. I think maybe just a bit more brightness. Again, I might bring the shadows up just a little bit in this one. Just a little bit. Yeah, I think the sky and the water popping just a little bit. Not too much, just enough. I think it's just brought the film to life. So I think we'll leave it there. We've been going for over 20 minutes now. You've watched me edit my favourite images from my trip. I'll be posting them on my Instagram and blog and all sorts. I will link them down in the description below. As always, thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.